Before you went public and said you saw it in the documents, I had already researched it and contacted people like Colonel Boatwright and John Lear.
And we're telling people that William Greer shot President Kennedy, and now you're backpedaling and saying somebody proved that he didn't. Show us the proof.
No,
where's the proof that Greer didn't shoot the president?
Well, it's on.
You've said right here that it's been proven. Show us the proof. Where's the proof?
How am I going to show you?
You're trying to keep the American people from knowing who shot the president. You said it yourself.
That's BS.
Tom, did he say it or not? He said it was proven that Greer didn't shoot the president.
What I am trying to do is get people to understand that tape does not constitute absolute proof, okay?
Notice the bully boy tactics, the screaming over Hansen. I knew back in those days that this was a discredited piece of video footage. Here's the bottom line story on what people were actually seeing, and it wasn't a gun. You got to remember the time that this video or this film was shot. Dallas, Texas, November 1963. And what did men use on their hair? Well, that greasy kid stuff like Brill cream. And the bottom line was when they washed the Keller out of the film, there was a reflection off of the Secret Service driver's head, or the Secret Service passenger's head. And it's literally just a split second that it does in fact look like there's an object pointing at Kennedy. And as it turns out, this was the exact moment that Kennedy was in fact shot in the head. Probably, my own opinion now, probably from the grassy knoll. Look, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, a whole lot more, because now I'm going to be talking about the first of two-part expose that I did on Milton William Cooper. Now, you had in the last segment just a small taste that Cooper could become loud, verbally violent, but here was the other thing that he was doing, and he did it the entire time I knew him. He drank alcohol to excess, as he later told a couple of people he was in business with. Hollywood movie star Michael Callan and Callan's best friend, who was an old-time Hollywood executive by the name of Doug Dean, he would drink a bottle of Chivas Regal nightly, or at least every other night. He was so concerned about the secret government coming to get him. Now, Callan and Dean had heard Cooper back on the early days of the Billy Goodman happening. Doug Dean had had an interest in UFOs for many, many years. So he got together with Michael Callan. They approached Cooper and said, look, we could package you in the show business way and get your message out there in a big way. Are you interested? Well, of course, Cooper was. He signed the contract, and they did a huge show for him at the Showboat Hotel, Las Vegas, and it was something that Goodman extensively promoted. Now, there's a lot to this story, and Doug Dean and Michael Callan are going to pop up a little bit later. But in the meantime, I had started doing my investigation on this guy to try to figure out if he was real or not. And one of the people that I talked to once again was Robert Lazar. And Lazar told me that, hey, this guy had a potential to be violent. And I said, what do you mean violent? Are you talking about physical violence? Well, this is what Lazar had to say.
Someone really needs to do that because he is absolutely... The unfortunate thing is he's an intelligent man. From the couple times that I've met him, I've seen that he writes well, he comes across well, and he's very believable. And that's really unfortunate because I hate to call someone a psychopath, but he's really crazy. I mean, he comes out with the most, of course, unless he knows exactly what he's doing and, you know, he doesn't believe it, but it really seems like many of the things he writes about, he honestly believes to the point where he'll fight about him and get violent.
You mean physically violent?
Physically violent.
With whom?
John Lear. Well, I walked in on the middle of something and Cooper's sitting there. Okay. I just walked in with my sister-in-law one time and Cooper was sitting there talking to John. And it was kind of upset about something being printed or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it is. I don't know. I mean, after a brief time talking with Cooper, he got up and started screaming and throwing shit around, and he was a lunatic in no time at all. Granted, he was drinking a lot, and There again, both times I met him, he always has some liquor connected to him, not beer or something like that, but always drinking some sort of hard liquor. So I've never seen him in a completely sober state.
And I had some dealings with Cooper when he was liquored up. Here was a guy that when he felt you wronged him, would wait until the middle of the night, start drinking. The more he drank, the angrier he'd get, and he would start leaving phone messages on your answering machine. Now, of course, the guy who really was instrumental in bringing Cooper out to the public initially was none other than John Lear. Lear was the guy that had the first real dealings with him through the old Paranet system. But I'll let Lear tell you about it.
I became interested in UFOs. Prior to that time, although I'd heard about them and heard many stories, I didn't have a personal interest in it. A friend of mine who was a Raven, those were the U.S. pilots that flew directly for the U.S. ambassador in Laos, one of them, who I had known fairly well over there, retired and came to Nellis Air Force Base in 1985. He called up, came over, and we were starting to talk about old times. When he mentioned, I asked him where all he'd been based since I'd last seen him. And one of the bases he mentioned was Bentwaters. Bentwaters is a United States Air Force base about 70 miles north of London. Being familiar with some of the UFO stories, I said, oh, that's where that UFO supposedly landed in 1980. And the three aliens walked up to General Gordon Williams, the wing commander. And Greg said, no, not supposedly, John. It happened. I was there. I did not see it because I was confined to quarters, but I got the whole story in the stand-up briefing the Monday after that weekend. So I turned to Greg and I said, what do you mean? This stuff is all true? There are saucers and aliens? He said, oh, yeah. And I got to thinking, boy, there's been a lot going on that I don't know about. And the bottom line of which is I found that, yes, they do exist, and things are going on in this country that the public has absolutely no idea. The most important thing is that there is a secret government. It is called MJ-12. I have 5 very good sources for that information, one of which is probably the most respected U.S. general. He is currently still alive, but been retired for many years, who said that MJ-12 did exist, but he could not tell me any more about it. As soon as this general passes on, which should be in the next 2 or 3 years, unfortunately because of his ill health, I will reveal his name. In 1987, I was working a computer network called Paranet in Phoenix, Arizona, out of my home in Las Vegas, and making certain statements about aliens and the secret government, to which I was the subject of a great deal of ridicule. On the computer board came a person named Bill Cooper, who made the statement that while I cannot back up all of Lear's allegations, I can certainly back up at least 50% of them, because I was aware of this information while with the Navy in 1972.
John, just to clarify,
the summer of '88 that I was working that computer network out of Phoenix, and Bill Cooper had come online and said, well, I can't verify all of Lear's information, at least 50% of it is true, based on my involvement with the subject in the Navy in 1972. When Bill began to support me, I began sending him information and copies of documents which I had. Specifically, in August or September, I sent him a Federal Express package which contained a copy of literally everything that I had got as far as information on UFOs and the secret government. Sent him a number of tapes. There might have been 3 or 4 of videotape containing video programs such as the 1985 CNN broadcast of the Bentwaters incident, UFOs past, present, and future, that was produced in cooperation with the Pentagon by Sandler Films and another number of other films. In this package was the President Kennedy tape, the Zapruder film, or a copy of the Zapruder film, which I had obtained from Lars Hansen. So that would have been September or October of 1988. When I sent that to Bill, I don't recall exactly what he said about the theory that Greer shot the president, other than to say that it was interesting. The first time that I heard Bill really come out and say anything definitive about that particular sequence was in an April or May show called On the Record with George Knapp here in Las Vegas, in which George Knapp, in which I showed the tape and made the allegation that it was a possibility that Greer shot the president, George turned to Bill and said, "Did you hear anything about this when you were in the Navy?" Bill Cooper said, "No, I didn't hear anything about it. I read about it." And I was startled because I had never heard Bill say anything so positive about the Greer shooting. And that was the first time I'd heard him come out so positive about it.
Well, as it appears, as things would pop up, Cooper appropriated them. I saw him do this time and time again. And he was getting more and more airtime on the Billy Goodman happening. Now, remember, earlier in the show, one of the names that popped up in connection with checking out Bill Cooper was former Las Vegas Bullet reporter Tony Pelham. Now, while I was interviewing Tony, the subject of Billy Goodman and his radio show popped up. Tony told me about a time that Goodman had called him up because, according to Bill Cooper, what Cooper told Goodman, Pelham could verify everything that he had to say about his background. But why have me tell you about it? I'll have Pelham tell you.
But the guy's not, he's fairly sharp because I know he's making a living out of this thing. He's making some money somehow, isn't he?
Oh, my God, yeah, he's making money.
Show folks, he's come up here and...
Yeah, what, 700 people were up there at...
Goodman called me right before that. I don't know if Bill had told him, but Billy Goodman didn't remember me when he was trying to tell me on Elvis Was Alive and Well a few years ago in Vegas. And he says, "Oh, I need you to go on to my talk show tonight." He said, "I understand you can verify Bill Cooper." And I started telling him basically like what I've... "Oh, no. No, well, we believe Bill Cooper. We can't have you on the show."
Well, the bottom line was Goodman saw Cooper as a big draw to his radio show. And, of course, what do radio shows do? They sell advertising. No big surprise. So, later on that summer of 1990, Part 1 of my expose ran in UFO magazine. The volume was Volume 5, Issue Number 4. A month and a half after that, the second part of my expose on Cooper ran in Volume 5, Number 5. Now, immediately upon Part 1 running, we received one day a certified letter. I looked at the letter. On the letter was a name I had never seen before, so I opened the letter up, signed for it, opened it up, and it was a letter from Bill Cooper demanding that we retract everything, or his lawyer is going to file suit on a contingency basis. I have nothing to lose, go for it. Well, he answered that letter in the pages of UFO magazine and said, well, you know, the best defense against libel is the truth. And we are backing up everything that was in that article. So if you want to sue, buddy, you're just going to have to sue. Well, that was the last we ever heard of it. But Cooper, in the interim, had begun publishing a small newsletter called the Kaji Newsletter. And suddenly, along with George Knapp, John Lear, Bob Lazar, Whitley Strieber, Stanton Friedman, Bill Moore, Jamie Chandra, we were now being named as secret agents of the secret government. Well, this is all part and parcel of the publishing game. You can't please everybody. So Part 2 ran, along comes September 1990. And on the evening of September the 26th and the early morning hours of September 27th, I got a phone call. It was late at night. I hadn't gone to bed yet, but I was watching TV or something. I answered the phone. Hello? It was somebody I knew, and they said, Don, are you listening to Billy Goodman? And I said, no. Why? Bill Cooper is on there, and boy, is he tearing you and Vicky up. So I said, okay, thanks. So I turned on the radio, and sure enough, Cooper was on there, and he was, a friend of mine sent me an audio tape of the entire show, because, quite frankly, I came in the latter part of the show, like an hour before it was going off the air. I reviewed the tape, of course, and for years it's been sitting in my records. But when I was getting ready to do this show, I went through literally dozens and dozens of audio tapes looking for the appropriate quotes that I needed for this story. And finally I came across this. Now, in retrospect, this particular confrontation on the radio became almost legendary back in those days. But Billy Goodman had found